Welcome back to Sports and the Law, examining the legal evolution of America's three major leagues. And today we're going to update you on Chapter 2, the Uniform Player Contract. There's so much to talk about. And again, we have our three resident experts. Zach is with us, and Ryan for MLB, and Aaron for NFL. And we have a lot of good links, and we're going to scroll through them. And this updates Chapter 2, primarily the Uniform Player Contract section of it, and each of the different, starting at page 63 of the book is really where we are. So with that little intro, okay, our NFL expert, Earl Thomas. Aaron, take us through. He's cut by the Ravens, on-field versus off-field. We have to keep thinking about that, right? We have to talk about conduct detrimental, whether it be Article 46 in the Commissioner's Authority, also the team. You can't have two penalties. The team can also discipline for conduct detrimental. Expected to try to avoid his $10 million guaranteed salary. He wasn't actually suspended for that. It was to avoid the guarantee, as the PowerPoint tells us. And, again, he's got a grievance. It is expected he'll file a grievance. What does your crystal ball tell you, Aaron, is the most likely outcome on that?
Yeah, so I guess I should probably clarify too. It was an on-field altercation. In addition to, from what I've heard and read, couple, not showing up to practices, showing up late, and things like that. I think this kind of tension was building, and then there was this on-field altercation, and so the Ravens cut Earl Thomas, and for a reason that they claim was conduct detrimental to the team. This is unlike some of the other lawsuits that we'll see in specific, or releases that we'll see in specifically Antonio Brown next, is that, he wasn't disciplined specifically for conduct detrimental to the team before he was released, or he was released because of conduct detrimental to the team. In my opinion, and I think that's kind of where the two arguments lie. In my opinion, I don't think Earl Thomas has an incredibly strong grievance because he was cut specifically for conduct detrimental to the team, which is outside of the guarantees in his contract. I'm sure Earl Thomas would disagree with me and claim otherwise, but that's kind of where I see this this grievance going and being resolved in terms of Earl Thomas' contract being void because he was released for conduct detrimental to the team, something that was not covered in his guarantees in his contract.
Right, as opposed to being released for skill or salary cap or injury reasons.
Correct.
As
which were guaranteed, right.
Which were guaranteed. Really good distinction, thanks. You talked about Antonio Brown all night. Again, this is his helmet grievance, bringing it up to date. This was, you must wear a certain kind of helmet. This is all the player safety stuff we're going to be talking about throughout the course. He'd been using this non-approved helmet. He didn't want to wear it. Filed two grievances. Both he lost both cases. There's a lot of detail here, a lot of different links. It sort of goes to this really crazy analysis, which we're going to get into, the uniform and equipment rules and policies in the NFL, starting at page 71. But in terms of the helmet, the various links tell us, very specifically how they can, deny his grievances. And again, this doesn't go to the commissioner because it's not the commissioner's authority. It's not conduct detrimental. It's not personal conduct policy.
Right. So specifically, they said, he couldn't wear this helmet. Brown grieved and said he should be able to wear this helmet. And they, he thought he came up with, him and his agent Rosenhaus thought they came up with some loophole, finding that if they could find the same model helmet made within the past 10 or manufactured within the past 10 years, then he'd be able to wear it. That was not successful. He then said, they said, no, you can't do that. They actually tested this helmet and said that, oh, this is unsafe. We're not going to approve this because this specific helmet wasn't actually listed on the list of banned helmets, probably because it was so old that they didn't even bother testing it. So when he did say he wanted to wear this helmet, they tested it again, said, no, you can't wear this helmet. It's unsafe. He said, I did not get, his second grievance then was, I did not get the 1-year notice that I shouldn't be able to wear this helmet. And that was the grounds for the second grievance. Those were also denied. He ended up, before everything else happened, he did switch to a different helmet. But again, he, as we'll see in the next bullet points, Raiders, Patriots grievances, he did end up playing with a different helmet, but then, a few other things occurred later in this year that we'll get to. Professor Carfagna, your audio is a little off.
Yeah, Antonio Brown continues to give us lots of stuff to talk about as we catch up from last year to this year. And here we go with Raiders, Patriots, still ongoing. Yes, so the Raiders, again, it goes to guaranteed money. Again, it goes to, a $250,000 fine. Again, it's conduct detrimental vis-a-vis the team, not vis-a-vis the league. Therefore, it stays within that hermetically sealed grievance arbitration. Would not ultimately, in the same with the Patriots, ultimately, this is going to be resolved through grievance arbitration. This is a non-injury grievance with the Patriots having voided his contract. His main arguments was he had earned it upon signing, as the bullet point tells us, and we do have footnotes that give you the further detail. And ultimately, as we scroll down, you'll see, at least with the Patriots, there was a confidential settlement. What other details should we know about these two grievances?
I would just say, I think if you're comparing the two, the Patriots grievance is probably a stronger grievance for Antonio Brown. It was a 1-year base salary, $1 million base salary, $9 million on signing bonus, and then I think there's $5 million in incentives there. So under the CBA, it's once you actually sign that agreement, you've automatically earned that money. So when he got, released, I think a week or so, week and a half after he signed with them, he already earned that $9 million. And that's what the Patriots were trying to avoid here. And also there's, specific language in his contract, and it was, not exactly, I don't think you'd see in a lot of contracts, something similar to it, but basically basically conduct detrimental, just in different terms. He also tried to claim that the CBA doesn't permit that language to really be in his contract, or for the team to void that guarantees based on that language. So I think it really was a stronger argument for a stronger grievance for Antonio Brown against the Patriots than it was against the Raiders, especially after everything that happened with the Raiders. The conduct detrimental fines of $250,000 to void, not just, a signing bonus, but, the remainder of the guaranteed money on his contract. So I think that's why you saw the Patriots grievance settle and the Raiders you didn't. I think that's a little distinction there.
Really good point. And again, it was amidst sexual assault allegations, and
Right.
Perhaps the commissioner could have come down on that, but instead the team intervened. I mean, we've got all sorts of study guides on how this has been interpreted in the past. The Ray Rice study guide in the back of the book being instructive in this regard, among many others. Okay, so let's finish. Here we go with the Jaguars. Tom Coughlin, the most grieved man in the league, now gone from the Jags, but we can read everything about the rehab and must it be at the facility, and discipline, and arbitrator affirms that the CBA does not allow teams to require rehab must be held at team facilities during the off season. Aaron, and then right, there's 25% of the grievances, 25% of the grievances have been filed against the Jaguars under Coughlin.
And this has kind of been a rumor around the league for a while, and that the Jaguars have been the team that's been most grieved against. But kind of cut and dry is that Tom Coughlin was fining and disciplining people for things that he couldn't do under the CBA. And so it was appealed and, overturned because you just didn't have the justification to do it. That's why you see 25% of the grievances against the Jaguars, because he's been doing that quite often. Or had been, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I mean, it was stuff like, 2 minutes late for meetings, you're fine.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's not crazy stuff for him, but anyway, general updates to the UPC. Again, we're tracking through Chapter 2, payment spread over 32 weeks. Fully funded rule, minimum salary increases. Again, we've got years of service, and we've got various minimum salaries. And again, as we've said before, we get to the veteran salary benefit. This is almost a Larry Bird kind of thing there at the veteran salary benefit, that you can exclude as much as $1.25 million of each player's base on each year's salary cap. That's 2 of its own players per year, as long as they have 4 years of service. So these are all, as we said last week, Demore Smith has said, really the middle class did much better in the CBA negotiation going forward. Aaron, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say I think this third bullet point here, minimum salary increase, is what most people will tell you why this CBA was passed. It's because you look at years of service. This is 2011 CBA, that last year of it, versus the first year of the 2020 CBA, and these obviously increase as the CBA goes along, between 2020 and 2030. But this increase in $100,000 in minimum salary for players with 0 years of service, I think, is where a lot of the yes votes came from, specifically for the CBA. And I think that's what the NFL targeted. But I think another point to elaborate on is the fully funded rule. Traditionally, this is kind of the NFL's or the team's, I guess, ultimate defense about guaranteeing NFL contracts, because traditionally you have to put a certain, whatever you're going to guarantee in the contract, you got to put that in escrow. Fully funded rule said previously you could deduct $2 million of that of the months of the guaranteed funding. Under the new CBA, it's I don't think it kicks in for another couple of years, but it's $15 million instead of $2 million you could deduct, and then it gets up to $17 million. So while you're not going to see a ton of guaranteed contracts thrown around the NBA, I think, or the NFL, I think this is something that makes it a little more reasonable and possible maybe for a couple guys to get some guaranteed salaries, or at least more guaranteed salaries than you have seen in the past, just because that deduction to put that money in escrow is a bit higher. This veteran salary benefit is new, as we said, and then this is also something new, is the payment spread over twice the amount of weeks instead of the game weeks. And this 32 will increase to 34 when and if these number of games increases to 17 games.
Terrific. Thank you for that quick trip through the updates of Chapter 2. Now we go to our MLB expert, Ryan. Thanks, Aaron. And Ryan, welcome back here. We've got Jacoby Ellsbury. Again, outside medical treatment constitutes a breach. The grievance was filed against the Yankees in 2019. What else do you want to tell us? We got some footnotes elaborating on that one. What more can you tell us about that case?
So the Yankees, Jacoby Ellsbury controversy is a long-running one. If you follow the Yankees, he didn't play for maybe 2 or 3 seasons from a myriad of injuries, and he's one of the highest-paid players for the Yankees. So he was really a downward pressure on their salaries. And then it came out that he was having unapproved or, outside of Yankee facilities treatments, and the Yankees used it as a violation of his contract, as a grounds to void that salary.
And we've got a bunch of footnotes detailing that. I think this service time manipulation it hits home. I'm out here at our Lake County Captain's Park today. I saw Zach Plesac pitching almost a simulated game. Clevenger was just here. He was just promoted and maybe in a showcase game because they might trade him before the deadline. Pitched for the Indians last night against the Twins successfully. But take us through this service time manipulation. And again, it's all about getting to free agency. If you're a Super 2, it's all about getting to Super 2 status in the case of Plesac. It's possible they could have held Clevenger down. We've got a lot of detail here to the point where they would have had another year of control over him. I'm giving the general, but now go ahead and please take us through and talk about Chris Bryant and service time manipulation generally. Again, just so everybody understands, this is to keep control over a player for as long as possible before he becomes eligible for salary arbitration, and then on the other side of that, for free agency.
Yeah, this is maybe one of the biggest economic issues and disagreements facing players and the league, which is service time is how you make your money in the MLB, because your first 3 years are heavily limited in earning potential, and then your next 3 years are as well, because then you go into arbitration. Unless you're Super 2, then you go into arbitration for 4 years. But either way, you're not making market value. The team or an arbitrator is largely setting your salary. So that's a very difficult and big cap on earning potential for 6 years. Chris Bryant's the most notable example, basically arguing that the team is violating his contract and trying to delay his free agency by manipulating his service time. And while everyone sort of recognizes this is what's going on, it's very hard to prove intentionality on that to win a grievance. So Chris Bryant ultimately lost his grievance and will be a free agent in 2021, so 2 seasons from now, as opposed to after this current season. This also happened with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and we're seeing it potentially in real time. So Chris Bryant's grievance took place over 4 years. It took from 2015 to 2019 to mature and be settled. We're seeing it possibly with Plesac. Clevenger was actually recently called up, but Plesac was sent down for the same COVID violations as Clevenger, And he may end up staying in the minors long enough to deny him that year of free agency, the same as Chris Bryant. And we won't know the resolution for that potentially for years to come, but he could argue and have a unique and possibly strong case saying, I was sent down for the same reason as Clevenger, but I was brought up at a time that delayed my free agency, but he wasn't. Why was that? Other than that, it's a very hard case to prove, and it's something that significantly impacts players, especially in an analytically driven league where teams don't want to sign 30-year-old free agents anymore. You know, you've seen a lot of players complaining and the PA complaining about that, about the free agency stalling out. And Chris Bryant's worried about that. Now he's going to become a free agent at 30 instead of 29 and might lose out on a $30 or $40 million a year worth of a contract. And then you'll see a note in here that it seems like right now that a player's best recourse is to bring public pressure on their team. So, you know, the Padres have a young little superstar in Fernando Tatis, and the Mets have a star in Pete Alonso, who both made their opening day rosters because fans were so upset, and the teammates were upset too. You know, one way you might see this play out if the CBA doesn't resolve it is that the Cubs, the year they kept Chris Bryant down, lost the division by 2 games or 3 games and were eliminated in the wild card round. So there's a competitive consequence to it and a PR consequence to it, if not a legal one.
Excellent explication of the details, and there's lots of good footnotes for those who want to dig even more deeply into those details. And now, Zach, here we go. Contract payments during COVID, the NBA force majeure clause. We went over this, and then of course we've got to get the NBA playoff boycott. Take us through how this 25% pay reduction is really. How does it stand as we sit here today?
So how it usually works is NBA players have 10% of their salary put into escrow, and it is given back to them at the end of the year if the league meets certain targets. This year, both sides agreed that they would increase this amount to 25%, and currently the 25% is still on hold. Usually what happened, or in this case what happened, was that the NBA has a certain timeline to exercise their force majeure clause, and it was, I believe it was 30 days after the initial day of the event. Both sides agreed to extend it till, I believe, October 15th. And so currently, players are still having 25% of their income being held in escrow, and it's just another negotiating tactic where there is strong incentive for both sides for the league to continue, because if the league gets canceled, it seems almost certain that they will not be able to meet their league revenue targets, and the players would not be able to get escrowed.
And you've really done a nice job. We talked about this last night. What happens under the operations manual if a team fails to show up for a game? Can lead to forfeiture and up to a $5 million fine. We know, thank goodness, they seem, and maybe Michael Jordan with his ownership cap on was instrumental in bringing everybody back to resume the playoffs. Tentative schedule Saturday start. But you went digging deep for finding this forfeiture penalty, and of course individual players across the 3 leagues who would choose not to play. You know, those are going to be very interesting issues. Why don't you take us through what the NBA operations manual told you as you looked it up last night?
So the NBA operations manual basically says that if a team fails to show up for the game, the commissioner has discretion in choosing to either allow the forfeiture of the game and a $5 million fine for the team. Given everything that's happening, obviously the social movement, it seems rather unlikely that Adam Silver will exercise this, and especially because the NBA press releases, they've all talked about the game being postponed, or all the games being postponed rather than forfeited or canceled. So it seems like at least in terms of team punishment and forfeiture, there will not be that equal punishment.
And individual teams won't invoke any of the termination clauses. I think they'd just be silly to do so. Those are summarized again throughout Chapter 2, page 67 and following. Give you some of the bases on which a team could take such action, but I think they'd be really ill-advised even to think about it. Okay, on a much lighter note, again, back to footwear, cleats and footwear violations, page 75 and following. You'll see Antonio Brown featured there. We have a lot of good details. They've been loosening restrictions. We know that throughout. Trevor Bauer wore the Joe Kelly cleats. Okay, and I guess the free Joe Kelly, there's Trevor Bauer, quintessential Trevor Bauer. Let's see, Aaron, you're the one who found that link. Do you want to just speak to it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, Joe Kelly, early in the year, Dodgers pitcher was eliminated by the Astros in 2017 when he was on the Red Sox as part of the whole Astros cheating scandal. Throws, intentionally, unintentionally, who knows, at Astros hitters, during a game. And then he gets ejected. It makes a whine face. Then gets suspended for 8 games. Actually, we addressed this in the first module. It's reduced to 5 games. A lot of players supported Joe Kelly and what he did. Obviously, not in support of the Astros. Trevor Bauer being one of those players, gets these custom cleats made, and they say, it's got a picture of Joe Kelly doing his whining face on it, and on the other cleat it says "Free Joe Kelly." Rob Manfred did not approve of these cleats. He said there was an MLB official I heard in the Reds locker room that told Trevor Bauer that if he was going to wear these cheap cleats, he was going to be ejected, suspended, and have unprecedented fines levied against him. So I think that's just another point on in the COVID year, intertwined with this footwear specific section, I think is where this can be a little illustrative in that, I think a lot of these, specifically for Joe Kelly, the fines could have been based on, coronavirus and the Astros cheating scandal, but then even Bauer in support of any of that, there's a little sensitivity with the MLB there. And I think, these were the repercussions of that, and that ejection, suspension, unprecedented fines if those cleats were to be worn.
Thanks, then, Zach. Zach, let's go back to you under NBA just real quickly. You also wanted to add the uniform policies as they relate to the NBA playing in the bubble. And I think we maybe we'll find a link if we haven't already about Jimmy Butler's situation where he wanted nothing on the back of his jersey. And maybe, Zach, you just want to comment on that before we finish the Chapter 2 update and move on to Chapter 3.
So the NBA, PA, and the NBA, they reached an agreement that players could use certain slogans on the back of their jerseys, things that represented the Black Lives Matter movement and things about the movement in general. I believe that there were 29 approved slogans that they came up with. Jimmy Butler eventually decided that he wanted to wear a jersey that had no slogan, or he didn't want to have his last name, he didn't want to have a slogan. He wanted to emphasize the idea that he was a Black man and he should be treated the same whether or not he was a physical player or not. He sent an approval request to the NBA to wear said jersey. NBA denied it, but Jimmy Butler, he went to tip off and he wore a jersey that had no last name or slogan. And the referees delayed the tip off. They basically said they would not start the game until Jimmy Butler started and swapped his jersey.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We're going to conclude this update video. Again, in the appendices, there's lots of NFL uniform and equipment rules and policies at page 337 and following. If you want to look at waivers of recourse study guide as to why everything goes to grievance arbitration, almost everything, that study guide is at page 344 and following. Again, we've got all sorts of updates coming your way, but I think maybe the takeaway here across the 3 leagues is, let's just finish with you, Zach. In terms of actually pulling the trigger and saying, well, we're going to invoke conduct detrimental. We are going to invoke either under the Uniform Player Contract or under a league or commissioner's authority policy. It's just not the wise thing to do in this environment. Maybe you just want to comment on that, having worked at the league office last year.
Absolutely. I think for certain leagues like the NBA, especially since they're so player focused, so socially conscious, it would certainly go against their messaging for them to enforce any of these provisions, even if they have that power to. I think this goes back to the idea of even if you have the power, whether and you have the discretion, whether or not it's rules to do so. And for most of these leagues, especially given the temporary nature and everything that's going on, there'd be huge public backlash if they were to enforce any of these provisions against the players.
Terrific. Well, thanks for everybody's attention. This is a great update on Chapter 2, and we'll close this session out and we'll revisit Chapter 3 next. Thanks very much, everybody, for your continuing attention.